Susanne Dodgson, Wiesbaden, Germany, September 6, 2017. You're looking down the street from what was the Jewish synagogue. And here is a wall representing the outside of the Wiesbaden synagogue. And it's in English as well as German, and I'll show you what it says. Let their names be remembered. At this site, the people of Wiesbaden commemorate their Jewish fellow citizens murdered by National Socialists between 1933 and 1945. The persecution of Jews began in 1933, following Hitler's appointment as Reich Chancellor. Public officials were dismissed. Doctors, judges, and many others were excluded from their professions. Jewish shops were boycotted. Attacks and acts of violence increased. The first Jews were murdered or interned in concentration camps. In 1935, the repression was intensified with the passing of the Nuremberg laws, which stripped Jews of their civic rights. In Wiesbaden, as elsewhere, the pogroms of November 1938 signaled that Jews were to be completely excluded from everyday life. The first mass deportation to ghettos and camps began. The Berlin-Wannsee Conference in early 1942 confirmed plans for the systematic extermination of European Jews. Prisoners in death camps such as Auschwitz, Majdanek, and Treblinka were deprived of the last vestige of their dignity and individuality, their name. Instead, the inmates had a number tattooed on their lower arm. Following selection, forced labor, the gas chamber, and cremation, their ashes were hurriedly buried in anonymous mass graves. Some 6 million Jews had been murdered by the time the extermination camps were liberated in 1945. The band with 1,500 names carved in stone documents the life and death of the Jews of Wiesbaden. It gives them back their names. The Mikkelsburg Synagogue, with its 35-meter tall main dome, designed by Philip Hoffman and completed in 1869, was regarded as one of the finest buildings in Wiesbaden. The religious center and the school of the city's Reformed Jewish community, it expressed the social integration of the 3,000 Jewish citizens resident in Wiesbaden up to 1933. The synagogue was gutted by fire in the Reich pogrom night of 9 November 1938, the night Kristallnacht, and demolished in 1939. And here they talk about the biographical data of the Jews. Most of the Wiesbaden Jews who fell victim to Nazi racial hatred were deported in 1942, being transported by train via Frankfurt am Main to the purpose-built concentration camps and death factories in Eastern Europe. Their murder was prepared and carried out with meticulous bureaucratic precision. Nonetheless, in some cases it proved impossible to establish the exact dates of their deaths. That applies in particular to many of the Jewish citizens of our city who were deported via Lublin to Sobibor. After the war, the West German authorities fixed the date on which these murders victims died as 8 May 1945, the day of liberation from the tyrannical Nazi regime. So now I'm walking around what was the footprint of the synagogue. Right next to it here is a parking space. So I'm walking around the parking lot, and now you can see the stone with the names of all of the victims engraved in the stone. They've also built a road through what was the Synagogue, which seems a little disrespectful to me, but
it also gives a good perspective of how big the synagogue
it was very, very big. And I'd like to walk across the road if I can survive this traffic. But here's this side of the road and I'm going to walk over to the other side of the road if I can, just to look at some of the names and see if any of the names we know. Because my daughter's father's family came from this area. In fact, her father was born in Wiesbaden to a half Jew. Oh, thank you. Okay, this is dangerous. I'm taking my life in my hands. Yes, I'm trying to be careful. Okay, I have survived. Thank you. I have survived the walk across the synagogue. All right, here we are. Here are the names. Buchenwald, Sobibor, Wiesbaden, Auschwitz, Theresienstadt. So this is the W's here. Weisse. Names we know in the United States. Very familiar names. A lot of Weiss. Weinberg, Weinert, geboren Kahn. Kahn is the name we know. Marx, Rabinovich, Lowenstein, Levy. All right, in my daughter's father's family, grandmother's family, her father's mother's family, there were Lervis, Treblinka, Liebman, Nördlingers. I don't see any Nördlingers here. Actually, his Ruth Nördlinger's aunt was taken to a concentration camp in a wheelchair, but I don't know what her married name was. She was a Miss Nördlinger, and so here we are. Schoenberg, Seligman, Neumann, Marx, Plotky, Adelheid, Lowenberg. Okay, here's some. They're not necessarily in alphabetical order. They're more or less, but not completely. Löwenberg. I don't see a Levy. Do I see a Levy? No. And I don't see a Nördlinger. So I don't know what the names were. Geboren Löwenberg. So she may well be here. Her old aunt. The sister of 4 brothers who started a chemical factory in, I believe, Mannheim, which was taken over by the Germans in the 1930s, and it still exists. This is very moving, giving back their names. Moritz Nachman, 1862-1943, Theresienstadt. This was an old man of 81. Charlotte Richter, born Kundenberger, 1897-1943, Auschwitz, 46 years old. And here's someone looks like a young girl, Sally Rosner, 1924 to 1945. She was 21. I shan't.
Did my grandmother have any siblings?
Yes. Did you find a Nördlinger?
2.
Nördlinger. Rudolf. Oh yes. This was her uncle. Rudolf Leopold. That was her uncle. No, it wasn't. It was her first cousin. Her uncle had already died. All the old that generation had died. These were her. These were my daughter's grandmother's first cousins. Rudolf Leopold Nördlinger. Oh my gosh. 1908, 1944 Auschwitz. Oh. Well, this is we have a connection to people on this. I thought we might have, but I didn't know. So this is Eugene Nördlinger, 1906 to 1941. 35 years old, Kadama.
Do you know the names of any, like the maiden names of any people who married into the Nördlingers?
No, I don't. But okay, we know there are at least 2 here, and probably more. Floesheim is not very far away from Wiesbaden, which I suppose is why Ruth, a half Jew, gave birth in Wiesbaden in 1941. I think if we looked at every single one of these names, we'd find a lot more relatives. So here we came to Germany for my daughter to find her family, and we're finding it on a memorial to Holocaust victims. That is really intense and very distressing. You know, when you find something horrible, you really hope that you're not connected, that somehow or other everyone escaped, but we can see that they didn't. Frank, yes.
Johanna Elizabeth Frank.
Johanna, okay, Frank was yes. The Ruth Nördlinger was directly descended from the Frank who was the grandfather of Anne Frank. So certainly there will be members of the Frank family who lived around here too. Eva Frank, look at this, a young girl, 12 years old. Eva Frank, 1933, 1945. Dara Mathilde Frank, that might have been her mother.
It should be noted that thanks to the information on the plaque, it's entirely possible a lot of the people who died in 1945 actually died earlier, but their deaths couldn't be confirmed.
That's
so they
right.
were just written as Liberation Day.
Yes, yes, that's right. So we don't know when people died. If it says 1945, they could well have died earlier because they couldn't find records. So there we are. So there are Franks here. So that's more connections. So she's connected to at least 4 people on this wall. Ah, dear me. So many died in Auschwitz, but they said on the memorial that Sobibor was the most likely place. Okay, and here so this is, I don't know why they decided to build a road through the synagogue, but maybe in order for people to see. Maybe this was the point. When you're driving along, you can see this very bare area made of concrete and bricks. It's a very effective memorial, and I don't like the trash cans right next to the wall, but I guess no disrespect was meant. This is Susanna Jane Dodgson in Wiesbaden, September 6, 2017. peacescientists.org.